All right, who's ready for another episode of the RR Show? We got some good stuff here. A bit of a grab bag episode. 3 stories. First one going to be a long one, then 2 great ones from Entitled People and PettyRevenge. That's the second half, I guess you could call it. So let's start this episode of the RR Show with me, Vince, right now. So this first one comes from r/WeddingShaming. From Shell Bell ATX. Wedding from HE double hockey sticks. This is a true wedding story that I've shared many times, but never in writing. So here goes. Hand on the Bible, all this really happened. My cousin was getting married. Both her and the fiancé wanted to have a small wedding. Nothing elaborate. Justice of the peace and lunch at Whataburger would have been fine with them. But her mother wanted to see her little girl walk down the aisle in a white dress with all the trimmings, so they reluctantly agreed. The bride didn't plan one single second of this wedding. She only agreed to show up. Her mother started planning and making arts and crafts the same day. The very first thing she did was hand sew a quilted 200-page memory book with more lace on that thing than Queen Elizabeth's coronation gown. Second thing was to create her own wedding planner book with 500 pages so she could keep track of this fiasco. Priorities. Once that was done, she sought out a local church with which they had no association or membership that would actually agree to rent the church facilities for the day. She went to Hobby Lobby several times to secure supplies and wedding items. She bought one or more of every single item they sold. Family came from Texas for this wedding. The bride had no bridesmaids nor attendants, and neither did the groom. We arrived on Friday before the Saturday wedding to settle into our hotel. As soon as we arrived, the mother of the bride admonished us for not having arrived a week earlier to help her, even though she never asked for our help. And she knew we worked all week and had driven 400 miles to come to this wedding. We thought we were guests, not unpaid workers. The morning of the wedding, the mother of the bride called me at the hotel at 7 a.m. so angry that I wasn't already at her house to help. I quickly dressed and went to our house to help where I could. We'd made pew bows and decorated the church, among other work. The MOB, the mother of the bride, was an angry mess and no one was happy. The bride was apathetic and was giggling and making fun of the entire thing. The wedding was to start at 7 p.m., and the rehearsal was at 4 p.m. that same day. The bride showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, wearing a ponytail. Once the rehearsal was over, I mentioned to the bride that she best get moving and get her hair and makeup done. This is where it gets good. She told me she was not wearing any makeup and was not doing anything with her hair. She said her big veil would cover her dirty, ponytailed hair anyway. She didn't even bathe or shower, I swear. Plus, she never even seen the dress she was supposed to wear at her own wedding. She had no idea what was going to happen at this wedding either, since her mother planned the entire thing, since the bride and groom had absolutely no interest whatsoever. The bride was dressing in the back room of the church, and she and her mother were arguing over every little thing. Someone commented that she didn't seem overly excited about her big day. She replied that she was only excited about the cake she was able to eat later that evening and wished she could have a piece now. She didn't understand why the cake couldn't be cut now since it was hers. She was finally in this huge, lacy dress with multiple petticoats that her mother had rented. This dress was huge, and it looked like one of those collectible doll dresses with all the layers and bows. She actually had a pair of high-heeled white witch boots for her to wear. The bride said she'd never worn high heels in her life. To be fair, both she and her groom were goat ropers that wanted to wear their wranglers and boots and just go to the justice of the peace to be married. She could hardly stand in those boots, and she looked ridiculous when she finally wobbled down the aisle. Her father had to help her stand upright in those boots the entire way. She brought a huge Route 44 cherry Dr. Pepper from Sonic and was slurping on that thing the entire time her mother was dressing her. She's finally dressed, ready to walk down the aisle, waiting on her musical cue after Butterfly Kisses was over, when that big drink cup slips out of her hands, crashes to the floor, spilling and splashing red syrup and Dr. Pepper all over everyone in the room, especially on her huge white lacy dress. It was at this moment when the mother of the bride screams at the top of her lungs. There was a draped window between this dressing room and the chapel, and every single head turned around to see who yelled in the church. We quickly wiped as much of the red syrup off the rented dress, which she wound up having to buy due to the damage, and off of ourselves. The bride was no bridezilla, but the mother of the bride sure was. She scared the hell out of me many times that day. The wedding procession began, and the bride giggled, laughed, and wobbled down the aisle with her father's help. The mother of the bride stood at the back of the church with her hands on her hips during the entire wedding. It was sad that she didn't get to enjoy all this planning she put herself through. When the ceremony was finally over, everyone went to the church reception hall. The bride raced to the cake and cut herself a huge piece of cake without the groom and held it in her hand as she wolfed it down. There was no reception line nor any seating. Everyone stood around and helped themselves to a piece of cake. The bride and groom disappeared during the reception. There was a gift table, and several of the out-of-town guests had brought their gifts to the ceremony. The bride actually opened the gifts like a child at a birthday party. She wasn't shy about expressing her disappointment at the various household items that were gifted. Comments like, "What am I supposed to do with this?" when opening a hand mixer her aunt had gifted. When it was finally time for them to leave for their honeymoon trip to Whataburger, the mother of the bride had made available near the exit about 10 baskets of birdseed wrapped in tulle with a ribbon to throw at the couple as they exited the church. As the guests gathered on the sidewalk outside, several people began to complain about burning eyes. About 10 kids were crying with red faces and eyes, and many of the elderly guests were running to the bathroom to flush their eyes. Noses running, eyes burning, welts forming on their faces. We learned that she used squirrel-proof birdseed that had been dusted with capsaicin to deter squirrels from bird feeders. Before anyone realized the birdseed was a weapon, most of the guests had pelted the bride and groom with this, and they too were crying, red-faced, with welts around their eyes. Eventually, a guest with a veterinary background assumed this was the issue. The mother of the bride denied having used this type of birdseed and told the veterinarian to go straight to hell. Most people raced to the nearest convenience store to get milk to help ease their suffering and left this fiasco. The next day, most of the guests still had welts around their eyes from the birdseed. On a happier note, the couple is still married to this day and have a daughter and a grandchild. It was not a fun wedding. Our next story comes from r/PettyRevenge, posted by user Confused Rock. I confronted my bully. I put bully in quotes because it only happened once. On to the story. I, a minor female, was sitting on the floor in gym class. We were going to play volleyball and the teacher was announcing the teams. Suddenly, I hear my name behind me, so I listen. If I have my name, on my team, I'm gonna kill myself. I turned around and stared at the person who said that. Wrong, my name. She said her friend supported her and followed up with, yeah, she was talking about her neighbor. Her name is my name. Two problems with this. My name is not a normal English name, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one with my name in this school. Two, why would your neighbor be on your team? There is no one person with my name in this class. I look at the girl. She asks, what is your name? I ask, my name? She responds with, yes. She goes silent. Tell me your name. I can tell that this isn't going anywhere, so I turn to the person on my side. We used to be friends, so I'm comfortable talking with them. Do you know her name? They responded with no and ask, why so? I tell them what happened. The gym teacher starts calling out the teams, and I realize I can find out her name this way. Obviously, the only logical thing to do is to stare at her and wait for her to react to one of those names. As I wait for her name to get called, the people next to her are getting called up. She scoots over to someone I recognize. I hear the name of the person I recognize called. Then I hear the name Izzy called. Fake name. They smile at each other and walk over to their group. When my name is called, I go over to the teacher and ask to go to the counselor's office. I'm gone for the rest of the class. Next block, my old friend comes up to me and tells me that her name is Izzy, and that she overheard her telling her friends that she would lie if she gets pulled into the counselor's office. I thank them. Next class in gym, we went outside because it wasn't that cold. I see Izzy playing with her friends while I sit there alone. What am I doing wrong, I think? Why does a mean person get friends while I have zero friends? As my brain typically does, it comes up with a scenario where I get Izzy to apologize to me. I get an urge to go up to her. It's like an itch. I stand up and my legs start walking forward. I'm doing it. I see her coming closer to me. I stop when she's right in front of me. I call her name out. Izzy. What? Apologize. For what? You know why. Huh? You know what you did. She gives in and says sorry. I'm not satisfied. Her voice is insincere. Say it like you mean it. Once again, she says, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for, I ask, craving more. I'm sorry for being mean to you. How were you mean to me? I'm sorry because I said if I'd want to die. It wasn't the full thing, but I figured it was all I was going to get. I said thank you, and I walked off. Later, thought of all the things I could have said to make it feel better, like pushing her to say the full thing or telling her that I don't forgive her. I decide that I'm satisfied and I leave it there. When I'm leaving my last class of the day, I see Izzy waiting outside the door, probably for a friend. When I see her, I become nervous. Then I remember what I did. I became filled with triumph. I felt so small against her, but she needed to know that I wouldn't let it go. It was affecting me when she was the one who said it. It felt like a bee was stinging her. A bug so small and insignificant, causing pain. Except I don't think I'm a bee. It didn't kill me. I'm more like a wasp, still having venom left to hurt. Our final story for this episode comes from our /EntitledPeople, posted by user SpookyGirl0123. He tried to take my airline seat and lost. I was traveling to Las Vegas to meet up with some friends and pre-booked my seat. With this airline, they charge extra for certain seats. I chose a window seat with extra leg room due to my disability, which cost me an additional $45. When boarding, there was a man in my seat with another in the aisle seat. The middle was open. I checked my seat number and then politely told the man he was in my seat and asked him to move. I am a petite female, and both men were about 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds. When both opened their mouths, it definitely appeared like they were both used to using their size to get their way. The man in the aisle immediately told me that the man in the window didn't have to move, and I could sit in the middle. After all, he said I shouldn't have to make a scene about it. That really pissed me off. I didn't raise my voice and was very polite, and I said I wasn't making a scene but was asking nicely for the seat that I paid for. That's when he stood up and attempted to physically intimidate me. But here's the thing. I worked in frontline healthcare. I am used to men attempting to use their size and mouth to intimidate, and this behavior does not work with me. So, I decided to take another tactic. I turned my head to the man in my seat and told him that I would make him a deal. He gives me $50 cash, and I will give him my seat. I told him I paid an additional $45 for the seat, and that with tax, it should be around $50. He gives me the money and the seat would be his. This is when he turned to me in shock and said, "You want me to pay $50 for your seat?" I answered, "So you're admitting that you knew that this seat wasn't your seat? I'm gonna call the airline staff and they can take you to your seat. After all, I booked this seat due to me having a disability, which is true, and you're trying to steal it." Everyone around us then turned to look at him, and they did not have kind looks on their faces. He turned 14 shades of red and moved to the middle seat, pulled his hoodie over his head, and sulked for the rest of the flight. His friend did the same. The moral of the story is simple. Do not use size and gender to bully others. It may just backfire on you and make your next flight a lot less comfortable. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince. Thank you to my producer, Kevin, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.